Hi. Some of you said you like these lectures, so I thought I'd start back up again. So this chapter, chapter 10, is how to work with dates. Now, hopefully what we're going to do is we'll look at different functions, methods, techniques for dates, timestamps, date intervals, kind of like when you want to do date arithmetic is kind of some of the things you can do with this. So we'll explain what a timestamp is. We'll kind of explain to you what a Y2K38, I mean, you may have heard the Y2K problem back with year 2000. Well, we may have a problem here because most dates are 32-bit functions, and when you convert that from seconds, it ends up being the year 2038. So it may cause some programs an issue, but this or websites issues. So this talks a little bit about how to maybe manage that situation, and then look at how to work with some timestamps, and then also date and time interval objects. So the date function returns a string, just returns a string, formatted as a date. So you give it a format code. How do you want the string to look? And the next two slides will give you different format options. And potentially, if you wanted to, you could say a timestamp. So that's an optional feature. But if you wanted to say, hey, I want it for this, give me this format for this exact timestamp, the date function would return that string for you. So here are some options. I'm not going to go each one of those, but you can tell you can get month, day of month, year, leap year, not leap year, leading zeros of the month, not. You can get hours formatted, 24-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour format with or without leading zeros. So it gives you a bunch of different options based on what you want to do. Oh, and then you see second since Unix epoch. Unix epoch is, let me just slide it, whoops. Thought I had a next slide. It is actually the date and time from January 1st, 1970. How many seconds existed? And that's what a timestamp really is the number of seconds from January 1st, 1970 to this moment, this second. And that's called the Unix epoch. So if you want that number, you can get it. So here's some examples. I'm not going to go through each one, but you basically can say, hey, I want it to be, month, day, year. You kind of go like, gee, why is this an N and it matches a month? Of course, you got to go back up to the code here. N says month with no leading zero. If you wanted it with a leading zero, you'd use the M. So just keep that in mind that sometimes the codes may be a little bit ambiguous, but you'll get used to it. Now, like I said, timestamp is an integer representation, the date since January 1st, 1970, Greenwich Mean Time. So that date and time is the Unix epoch. So those are just some key terms you can pay a look at. Now, if you want all the different timestamp functions and stuff, of course, PHP.net, the manual has a whole lot more. Some of the ones most people use is give me the time function. So basically, give me that. What is that timestamp for this moment? Give me a time. Create me a time with a given, month, day, year format. So now keep in mind, we've got it formatted January 1st, 1930. But to ask for it, what is it? I've got hour, minute, second, and then it goes month, day, year. So just kind of reverse of what we normally would think about. Now, you want to make sure that dates are valid. There's a check date function and it comes back positive or negative, true or false, whether it's a valid date or not. So if you want to write a function to check for validating, there's an example how to use that check time. That's validating the time, but you can use that thing. So you got number of different options on how to validate the time, how to validate the date. So you can use the check time or the check date, whatever you're validating. Now, sometimes you want just parts of a timestamp. So you got this timestamp, and this timestamp is just a large decimal number, but I just want the year. So the parts function says, I will give you the year, the month, whether it's numeric, alphanumeric, whatever you want to go. You can give it different options to say, just extract that from the timestamp. So now, sometimes I want to take a string and convert, give me a timestamp. So I want to tell me what this timestamp is. I want to use it. Now, so you got the formatting string and the time, the timestamp. Now, there's a couple of different ways, a couple of different terms. There's an absolute and a relative. So absolute says what? I'm going to give you a specific date and time that I want to have, I need this string, this timestamp for this particular date. Or I can give you a relative. Give me an offset based on a given start, or give me a base time, start or minus from a given date time to give me that timestamp. So just give you a rough idea here, and you go like, okay, now once you notice here, I'm getting timestamps. So give me a timestamp exact here. So this will give me the number of seconds, January 6th, January 18th, June 1st, 2018. And it says it starts, and when you do that without specifying the date and time, it defaults to 00. Now, if you specify the year, you get the specified year. But now if you do just the date, it says I take this date, because remember, I'm trying to get a timestamp. So I've got to assume something. If by less formatting put in, so I'm going to format, lost my mouse, there it is. So today's August 18th, August 11th, I can't read. And when I just specify the time, then I get a timestamp for that particular time, the specified time. The same thing with 8 a.m., same thing here. So now this last one here is kind of interesting. It says, I'm looking for a timestamp for the second, February 29th. Well, that may or may not be a leap year. And in this case, it returned March 1st. So it tells me that that request was not a leap year. So it moved it up for you one. Now there's some times that I want to make it from relative to my given time. So I'm starting with August 11th, and I can give me plus an hour, subtract 2 days, tomorrow at a certain time. So you can make some different options to get that timestamp. Now, how do I modify a timestamp? Well, guess what? There's a couple of those. You can do the make time function or the string to time function. So that gives you both of those options here. Oops, looks like I'm missing the closing parentheses there. But so keep in mind, absolute, I'm specifying an exact date and time. Relative, it's an offset, added or subtracted from the time it is at that moment the site is run. Now, how do I determine something's a leap year? Here's a brief little function. One of the function, that date function, was a leap year. So I'm checking if it's true or false. It's a leap year. I'm passing a timestamp. I'm checking the timestamp, comparing it to L, and I'm going to return 1 or 0 if it's a leap year or not. You can do the same thing with convert. What am I doing here? I'm doing got a particular date, convert it to a timestamp. That's what this function is doing. Passes it on to leap year and says yes or no if it's a leap year. So several different options here. Just how it's, some ways of verifying dates, verifying leap years, verifying how to print out messages. Here you go. How do I give me the timestamp right now? You sometimes you do expiration date. Sometimes you'll give me change the format of a date. So I've got a certain format here. It started out, I assigned it a typical 428. Now what I want to do here is I want to change that expression, and I want to change it. So I'm giving just the month, I'm giving just the year. So, and then you can put the expression back together again. So it just gives you different ways that how to use dates and times using the string 2 times. So you're basically taking the timestamp and creating different options and how to display numeric verifications and how to include those into your web pages. Counting down to New Year, ways of doing that, displaying it. If you want to create an object, so I want to, using the current date and time, I can create that. So this date time says, hey, give me an option here. So the date time function says, hey, tell me right now, give me the new date time. What is that function? So it gives me what? The date and the time. Here you got the explicit date and time you're going to expire, or I've got the relative. So that +1 +3 weeks gives you relative from what? From right now. So it gives you enough options. There's several other methods in how to use that date time. Format returns a string, formatted by whatever format you're asking for. Your set time sets a time, set date sets a date. Modifies it based on the format string, so however you want it to be modified. The get timestamp just what? Gets your date and time as a timestamp. Or set it, I'm setting the date and time using a timestamp, so I'm passing a timestamp to it. So different ways of manipulating your date and time. Now using different methods here, just ways of how it could be used, how to copy the date time object, how to set the times, the dates, how to modify them, just different suggestions of way you may want to use it in your code. Now, how do you create an interval? Here what we've got here is what? I've got P is begins with the interval, and I'm going what? I'm doing beginning the interval, and I'm going to go what? 30 days. So I'm giving you a number and a code. So here I've got my beginning, my interval, 30 days. So just give you some example here. I've got a new interval date. So I get here, we go 1 year, 2 months, 10 days. 1 hour, 2 minutes, 3 seconds, or you can combine them all together and go 1 year, 2 months, 10 days, 1 hour, 2 minutes, 3 seconds. So now how you want to format that date, several different ways of options in formatting here. You can put, sign the interval, so it's going to be plus or minus here. So I got percent, it gives me, say, put it in months, put it in days, capital R, so different ways of modifying that date. It lets you play with those just to get comfortable with it. Now, sometimes it's good to use, what's the date 2 weeks from now? Well, guess what? I can add or subtract from a given specified time. So if interval is specified, from now, let's say, what's 2 weeks from now? What would it be? Or add 2 weeks from today's specified time. Now, difference says, hey, I'm going to give you the timestamp from the current time, date time object, and to the date you specified. So you're specifying something, but then it's going to compare it to what it is exactly right now. So just different ways of manipulating dates and times. So you can add them, you can subtract them, you can change new dates, because you remember that timestamp is an integer, so you can do a lot of things with it to do a lot of validation. how to determine between two dates and times. So you got the date now, date, do the difference between the two. All of that gives you ways of playing with. If something is a leap year, this is when you're going to play with quite a lot. Expiration dates. If you're doing a lot of credit card applications, you may want to pay attention to the way this code is written here. Give more information about an expiration date. So just different ways of formatting messages and using some of the stuff. Not that we're paying dividend, we do code countdown to a new year. So take a look at that code. I think you'll find it educational, and hopefully this helped you a little bit in comprehending some of the material. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.